Alright, hello everyone, this is Venom, and we are here today with our first official build for the channel. This is our first full build we're gonna be showing off, and I'm excited to start this. So, now do please forgive me, I'm trying to talk slowly so I enunciate. This is actually the second time I recorded this. The first time I realized I was covering way too much of the screen with my face. You notice that I moved my camera to the top right. It was the bottom left, and I realized I was basically covering up everything that I wanted to show off. I also realized I was speaking way too quickly, so a lot of what I was trying to say, even I couldn't understand what I was saying when I went back and watched it again. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be our first build. This is going to be called the Paladin. This is a Titan build that is going to revolve around the Stronghold exotic gloves, and it's going to revolve around the Empyrean, the Ember of Empyrean fragment. With this combination, this is going to be the core of our entire build, and it's going to pretty much allow us to do whatever we want in the game as far as content-wise, as far as PvE. We will be able to get through Grand Masters with this. Once you learn how to use it, you will be able to heal your teammates, heal yourself. You're going to be able to block damage you never thought possible. It's going to be a very good very solid build to bring into any content you want to, but it is especially going to shine in Grandmasters. Now, first off, for those that don't know what the Strongholds do, they are exotic gloves. They basically max out your guard potential for your sword. Now, the second part of this is as you block damage with the Strongholds on, you're going to build up something called Perfect Guard. Now, the Perfect Guard can get up to times 100, and what's going to happen is, once you build up your Perfect Guard, when you then attack an enemy, you don't have to kill them, you just have to attack, you're going to activate Restoration times 2. Now, for those that were around when Solar 3.0 first came out, you could get Restoration times 2 very easily on all three subclasses, and you understand just how strong and how broken Restoration times 2 is. Restoration times 1 heals you pretty quickly. Restoration times 2 is off the charts quick. Now, as of right now, the only two classes that can get it are going to be the Warlock. They have a very specific build where they can activate it. But Titans can get it the easiest using these Strongholds. You can activate Restoration times 2. Hunters cannot get it at the moment, at least not that I know of. As of right now, they can get 1, but they cannot get 2. So Titans can get Restoration times 2 very easily. Alright, first off, we're going to go over our aspects. We've got the Roaring Flames. It says, final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities. That stacks up to 3 times. Now, we are not going to be using the solar grenade on this one. We're going to be using a healer grenade. So that means that any solar abilities are going to be mainly from either our super, or more often than not, it's going to be from the hammer we're going to use. So this is basically going to cause your hammer to do more and more damage. The other aspect is going to be the Soul Invictus, a very good one. You should probably have one at all times on your Titan. On your Solar Titan. And this one says, Solar Ability Final Blows, Hammer of Soul Impacts, and defeating scorched targets creates sunspots. Now, sunspots are basically spots on the ground, and they will damage enemies that get in them, and they will also heal you. You're going to get restoration, and they're going to scorch any other target. So sunspots are very good. It's basically AoE damage / healing for you. So there's going to be a lot of healing going on with this build. Now, like I said, as far as grenades, we're going to be using the healing grenade. Again, technically speaking, all parts of this build are interchangeable except for the Ember of Empyrean fragment and the actual Strongholds themselves. But this is a very specific build, like I said, that I'm taking into Grandmasters, and that is going to be mainly a healing and support build. So that's why we're using the things that we are. You could technically take this out and put on like Fusion Grenade or Solar Grenade. It'll still perform well in Grandmasters with that extra damage, but we are going to want that extra healing just in case. Like I said, Throwing Hammer is going to be the melee, or use whatever jump you want to, and use your Towering Barricade. You want Towering Barricade pretty much for any situation in the Grandmaster. You don't typically want the Rally Barricade. You're always going to want that Towering Barricade to, hold off doorways or block damage for you and your entire team. You don't want that small barricade. You want the big barricade. Now, as far as the fragments, we've got the Ember of Empyrean. Now, this is one that is going to increase the duration of Restoration and Radiant by getting solar kills with your weapons. So, it's going to come in very important. It's going to help us keep our Restoration times 2 going. Next up, the rest of these are fairly interchangeable, but these are the ones that I personally like to use. The first one's Ember of Mercy. Now, it's got 2 parts to it, and one is when you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration. You're not really going to worry about that one too much. The main thing is going to be that picking up a fire sprite is going to grant you restoration. On top of that, you also get 10 resilience for it. The next one is going to be Ember of Tempering. Solo weapon final blows grant you and your allies increased recovery for a short duration, stacks 3 times. When the Ember of Tempering is active, your weapons have increased airborne effectiveness, and your solo weapon Final Blows create a fire sprite. This is what's going to actually help you play into Ember Mercy. This is going to be your main way of getting fire sprites, is going to be with solo weapon kills. The rest of it, it's fine. The recovery is not going to be that big of a deal. I don't care about airborne effectiveness. It's mainly going to be to make those fire sprites. And finally, Ember of Solace. You can switch this one out pretty easily, but I kind of like to have that additional time for my restoration. This is just going to increase the duration of radiance and restoration. And since this build is going to be doing a lot of restoration, you're going to want to go ahead and increase that timer. Sometimes those couple of seconds will help to get between enemies to increase that timer, so it will help to have that on there. But again, this is one that you probably switch out easier than anything else on here. Alright, now before I go over the stats, I'm going to go ahead and explain exactly how it is that this build works. And I will demonstrate this later on. So again, the main way that this build is going to be working and played is that you're going to go into combat and you're going to pull out your sword. You're going to block as much incoming damage as you can, get your perfect guard up, go ahead and damage an enemy, and then get your restoration going. Now again, like I said, this build is going to be able to block whatever damage is coming at you, so you're going to make sure that you need a lot of mobility without running. You cannot run while you're blocking, so you're going to, one, probably want to re-key your block button if you don't have it keyed in, or you don't have it have it on a key you want to hold down for a while. But two, again, you're going to have to be able to block and move around without running a lot, or without running at all, because you cannot run and block at the same time. So you're going to have a stat on your Titan that you don't normally build for, and that's going to be mobility. It is going to be very helpful because that is going to be your strafing and your walking speed, which you're going to be doing when you're holding up your sword. That's why right now, a lot of you veterans are saying, I've got 90 mobility on my Titan, and you probably had a heart attack. Well, it is important to have that on here. Now, it doesn't have to be that high, but I would go ahead and pump whatever extra stats you've got after your resilience and your discipline into your mobility. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at the stats. So as you can see, I've got 100 resilience. That is going to be the first stat you're going to build for your Titan. Pretty much any time you're building for a Grandmaster, the first stat you're going to want to put on is your resilience. It's even more important for a Titan because that is your class skill. So that's going to be the first one you're going to want to get up to 100. Now in this case, we're going to want discipline. We're not going to be able to make any orbs of power with our grenade because it's going to be healing grenade. So we want as much cooldown on that, or as little cooldown on that grenade as possible. So we're going to go ahead and get as much discipline on there as we can. And then past that, we're going to go ahead and put every other point we can get into it into mobility. So as you can see, I've got 90 mobility, 100 resilience, and 109 discipline, and we're pretty much set at that point. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and talk about the mods we've got on our armor. Now, first off, our helmet. We have got 1 copy of Heavy Ammo Finder and 1 copy of Heavy Ammo Scout. Now, I'd like you to keep in mind going forward, this is going to be a general rule for any content you do in the game. If you're doing any PvE content, if you're playing solo, put on 2 copies of Heavy Ammo Finder. What that does is it increases the amount of times you'll find heavy ammo. Now, Heavy Ammo Scout makes it to where whenever you find ammo, your teammates also find it. Now, if you're going solo, 2 copies of Heavy Ammo Finder. If you're doing anything else in a team, 1 copy of Finder, 1 copy of Heavy Ammo Scout. Everyone on your team should have 1 copy of Finder, 1 copy of Scout. Now, there are some builds that are going to require you to have other stuff on, like hands-on or ashes to assets, but for the most part, if you're putting on any kind of ammo finder mod, and this build does require you to have heavy ammo, you want to do the heavy ammo finder. If you're solo, do it 2 copies of it. If you're in a group, 1 finder and 1 scout. That's some of the basics of doing stuff in a group, so keep that one in mind. Next up, we've got on a harmonic siphon. You're going to want to put on whatever siphon you're going to need for your sword. In this case, we're going to be using a solar sword for this. I meant to talk about it earlier. We're going to be using a solar sword. We're going to be using solar weapons. I get to those here in a minute, but we're using the harmonic siphon. That's going to match our subclass. And what this does is it's going to allow us to generate orbs of power on rapid kills of whatever our subclass is. So for our harmonic siphon, since we're using a solo subclass, is going to work off of solar weapons. Now, you can also choose just a specific type if you want to. Let's say you wanted to do it off of arc weapons, you choose arc siphon. If you want to do kinetic weapons, kinetic siphon. In this case, we're going to go ahead and choose harmonic. We could go ahead and just choose solar too, but harmonic is cheaper, so that gives us more points to work with. Next up, for armor mods, we do want to have other ways besides our weapons to create orbs of power. Now, again, we're using a restoration grenade, so we cannot use firepower, but we do have our hammer, so we're going to be using the heavy-handed mod. That's going to create orbs of power on our melee kills, and the bonk hammer is what it's named, or what is called in the community, is one of the best melees in the game, and is a very, very powerful tool for the Titan. So we're going to be using 1 copy heavy-handed. After that, the majority of the other mods and arms are not going to matter. We're not going to have to worry about any kind of loader mods, so that's not something you should really prioritize. You can be fine on that. And all the dexterity mods, none of that's going to matter in PvP, especially, or PvE. That's all PvP stuff. This is not going to matter in Grandmaster. Now, most of the other stuff on here, like your kickstarts, your Pawn of Vigor, none of these are really going to matter too much. You're going to be better off using Focusing Strike that I found from testing. Now, what that does is when it's going to get you class energy whenever you cause damage, not kills, but damage with a melee or powered melee. Now, very important for Grandmasters, if you have a choice between skills that activate on kills versus skills that activate on damage, you're typically going to want to use skills that activate on damage because it's much harder and takes a lot more to get kills in Grandmaster than it does in lower level or at level content. So, Focusing Strike, 2 copies of that is what I would use. And that is again, if you wanted to go with anything else, I'd say probably Grenade Kickstart instead of the copies of Focusing Strike. That's just going to help you get your grenade energy back, which again is going to be Healing Grenade. But depending on how much energy you got left over, you're not really going to have anything else that fits there. But I would say if anything else, go ahead and toss in Grenade Kickstart. I personally am using the 2 copies of Focusing Strike. Alright, next up for the chest, you're going to want to have 2 copies of Lucent Blade. Now, typically for Grandmaster, which is again, we're building this as though we're doing a Grandmaster, it's always easy to take a build made for Grandmaster and take that into lower level content. It is much harder to take a different build that isn't really good for Grandmaster and take that into Grandmaster. So kind of keep that one in mind. Unfortunately, there are some builds that just don't work in Grandmasters. You'll start to learn that. We'll talk about it in other videos. I think I've talked about it in one before, but one of the general rules you would typically put in, or do in Grandmasters is you're going to put these resistance mods on. Along with that 100 resilience, you put on the resistance mods to help reduce that damage. You're not going to do that with this build because you're not going to need to. You're going to be putting on 2 copies of Lucent Blade because you're blocking, and you having that blocking energy is going to be your resilience. Again, you're going to be able to block all damage, so your resilience is not even going to matter that much. As far as these extra mods here, but you do want to make sure you have at all times blocking energy. If you use a powered attack on your sword, it's going to take down your melee energy. You want to make sure that comes back as quick as possible. So, 2 copies of Lucent Blade, and then you can go ahead and toss on another reserve mod. You can really put whatever you want on this one. Personally, I'll put on a reserve mod just for extra sword ammo. You could put on a 3rd copy of Lucent Blade, although again, diminishing return, so it's not really going to be worth it. You could put on something, say, Fawn of Endurance if you don't have your resilience all the way up, but you should have it up all the way. Really, there's not too much on here. Maybe charge up, but unless you're using something like Grenade Kickstart, you really don't need the extra energy because you're not really going to be using it for that. So, like I said, 2 Lucent Blades and probably your reserves, and you're going to be good to go. Again, you don't need Unflinching for this. That's more PvP stuff. You don't really need any of the resistance mods. Just 2 Lucent Blades, toss on your reserves, and you're going to be good to go. Now, next up, we've got our leg mods. Now, this is where we're going to be restoring a lot of our energy, where we're really going to be spinning those orbs of power. Now, you're definitely going to want to have 1 copy of Innervation. This is the grenade-specific cooldown when you get an overpower. After that, what I would typically run is a copy of Absolution, so that you also get a bit more grenade energy as well as energy for all your other skills, along with a copy of Recuperation. Now, what Recuperation does is going to give you an instant chunk of health, okay? So that means whenever you run over an overpower, it's like picking up a health pack in a game. You run over that, you get health back immediately. There's no, build up. It's just, bam, you're immediately healed up to a certain amount and you're good to go. Now, those would be my recommendations for a Grandmaster. Now, if you're going to swap out anything, I would say probably the Absolution mod. You can change that out for, say, an elemental charge. Now, the only real exceptions I would make on here would probably be one of these surge mods, and that's only going to really be if you're doing DPS on some kind of raid boss. For Grandmasters, you're not really going to want to worry about the charges. You're not really going to be doing DPS races like that. It's not something you're really going to worry about. You're going to prioritize survival and getting your skills back, which are going to help you survive more than you are going to be any kind of, additional 10 or 15% damage. You don't need stacks on stacks. You don't need elemental charge. Orbs of Restoration is not going to be that great. Recuperation is going to be much, much better. I would go ahead and stick with those. If you're doing a raid or something, like I said, like if you're fighting Crota, someone where you definitely want to try to put out as much damage as you can in a small amount of time, then I'd go ahead and swap out, say, Absolution and Recuperation, put on a couple copies of Solar Weapon Surge or Arc Weapon Surge, whatever it is you're doing. But, like I said, with this build, there's going to be very few bosses you're going to be damaging up close and personal like that. Crota's the main one I can think of, and I do swap them out when I fight Crota, so kind of keep that one in mind. Alright, finally, we are at the class item mods, and this is going to be the one where you're going to have the most wiggle room, but the least amount of options, if that makes sense. And by that I mean, there's a lot of options on here, but a lot of them are not going to be applicable to what it is you're doing. What I mean by that, we've got Say the Reaper mod, that's going to be one that is going to be really good. It's one more way to generate and overpower, but even though it is an option, again, it's going to be one that really is going to rely on kills in Grandmaster versus one that's going to rely on damage or one that's more utility. One that is more utility is going to be Powerful Attraction. This is going to bring orbs to you or attract them to you when you use your class ability. That's one I probably use all the time. Proximity Ward is one that I use all the time in Grandmasters. Whenever you're getting a finisher, you're going to get an overshield. It's going to help you stay alive. Even if you have something like on a hunter, they have the invisible finisher ability when you go to finish the enemy and makes you invisible. In Grandmasters, doing that's very dangerous because even though you turn invisible, you're still going to be getting attacked for a few seconds even while invisible. Overshields are always going to be very good to have in Grandmasters, especially when you're using those finishers, so I would probably always have Proximity Ward on. Now, like I said, a lot of these aren't going to be worth it. For example, you don't really need to get an armor charge by finishing an enemy. You really don't need to do that. We've got Benevolent Finisher here. Using a finisher on a combatant spawns triple power for your allies. If you want to help your allies, that's fine, but this is also going to consume all your orbs of power. So, again, it's going to be really up to you. This is going to be very, very customizable for you. Alright, finally, we got the weapons. Now, the most important weapon for this build is going to be your sword. Now, for it, we're going to have two options. You're going to definitely want to have a solar sword. Now, we've got two solar swords that I would recommend. One is going to be the Lament. That's when you're going to be definitely using if you're doing like Crota and you're trying to do some boss DPS. If you're trying to take out any buried champions, you can use it. I wouldn't recommend doing it for buried champions. I'd probably use something like Wishender still, especially in Grandmasters, but you can use it. My recommended weapon is going to be the Throne Cleaver, though. This is the actual Titan class sword. You can craft this one. You can get the red borders and craft it up. You can actually buy all the red borders from the helm. They are random drops, so of course you can turn in your ingrams, but you can get this bad boy there. You can craft it up, and I have crafted my own up. I've got Tireless Blade on there, and I've got Incandescent. I haven't got the advanced perks on it because I just haven't had time to do it. But this is going to be what I recommend as far as your sword goes. Because it is a sword, which you need for this build, and it is solar, and just happens to be badass looking. So that's what you want for this, too. I mean, this looks like a sword King Arthur or something would use, or a paladin would use, hence the name Paladin. So that's going to be my recommended sword. Past that, for your secondary weapon, again, you're going to want another solar weapon. Now, I've got a glaive listed here. You're not going to want to use a glaive, unfortunately, and I brought this up as an example, because this is definitely a melee-focused build. However, the glaive melees do not count as that subclass type. They do not count. So, for example, the Braze Ruin here is a solar type. The melee on it is not going to do solar damage. The projectile on it is going to count as solar. However, the melee is going to count as just a regular melee, like a regular punch, just very strong. So unfortunately, unless Bungie decides to change that to where the glaives actually do elemental damage, which I think would probably be the thing that finally pushes them up to that level where they want them to be at. Unless they actually do that, unfortunately, this is not going to work for this build. But any other solar weapon you got is going to work because these are all going to work with that fragment of Ember of Empyrean. They're going to increase your restoration ×2 effect. Alright, so the way you're typically going to start out the build is you're going to bring out your sword, and the first thing you want to do is get your restoration ×2 going. To do that, you're going to block damage until you get up to Perfect Guard ×100. And you can see just how little damage, again, this is a Master. This is one step under Grandmaster. You can see just how little damage I'm taking. But once you get Perfect Guard 100, you want to then damage an enemy with your sword. So make sure you move around, you make sure the enemies stay in front of you so you can block them, get your damage on, and there, I've now got Restoration ×2. So now I can move around the battlefield a lot safer. I can use my melee abilities, I can use my sword. Even when I take damage, I'm healing through most of it. So here I am out in the open, I'm healing through all the damage he's doing to me. And that's how this works. If your restoration goes away, make sure you pay attention and you block your damage again until you get up there. On lower level content, it's a lot easier to keep your restoration ×2 going than it is in a higher level content. So you see I got it going again. I can now go ahead and safely stun them and try and take them out again. And again, don't just get forget about everything else you've got at your disposal. Don't think you have to sword everything down. You've got other weapons at your disposal. You've got your guard, but don't forget you've also got your other weapons as well. You've got your healing grenade. You've got your towering barricade. But the sword, of course, is going to be the main focus of the show. You can block pretty much any damage that comes at you. So it's very easy to get pigeonholed into that and forget, hey, you've got other stuff to do besides just sit there and hold block, even though it's very fun to do. And I guarantee when you use this build, the first things you're going to do is you're going to die in about 2 minutes because you're going to try to block a lot of damage and then forget, okay, I'm not necessarily invincible, and I've got other tools at my disposal besides the sword. But once you master the sword, you master the damage blocking, you master your restoration ×2, you are going to have not only an invincible Titan that can block anything, but you're going to be able to help out your teammates with your restoration. You're going to help them out with your restoration grenades. You're going to be able to pull aggro for them, anything you want to do. Now, this is not going to be the fastest killing build in the world, but it's going to be probably the safest build that I've ever made. You can see I'm down here again, and I'm just blocking all this damage. I don't even have my restoration ×2 going right now. I'm just blocking all of it. So, again, that is the build, guys. Again, you can see just how strong this thing is defensively. What we showed you was in Master. It does the exact same thing in Grandmasters too. Grandmaster is just a little bit more harder than Master. Again, this is going to work in pretty much any content you take this thing into. Now, it's not going to take out enemies the fastest, but it's going to let you take them out slowly and methodically and let you play very safely. And again, it's also going to have a lot of teammate support, especially with your towering barricade and your healing grenades. That's a big one. Your healing grenades also, of course, help you as well, along with your restoration, the constant cures you're getting, all the different ways you get restoration. Again, your sword will also do a lot of damage, especially if you go with the crafted one here. I've got incandescent on it. I can get the enhanced one on it. I just have not done it. Or again, if you want to take out any actual, if you want to do any boss DPS or take out any barrier champions, the Lament is also going to be a very good choice. So, again, this is a very melee focused, a very sword central build. So you're going to want to make sure you stick with you keep your heavy ammo up. The only real weaknesses for this build are, one, you got to make sure you don't get hit behind you. Now, things that happen, you might run out of energy for your sword, ammo for your sword, so that's why we have things like the healing grenade as well. You're, of course, going to choose the weapons that you're going to need for whatever task you're doing. The only other weakness I can think of for this thing is that, for some reason, the Maws in Grandmasters will one-shot you. For those that know, there are electric Maws that are in some of the missions in the game that came out with a Witch Queen, specifically the Maws in the swamp. For the Lightblade, will one-shot you through your guard. They will just one-shot you regardless. I've tested it out many times. I don't know why they do that. There's no real way to stop them, except for either just running from them, but eventually they're going to catch you. You're going to have to shoot them out of the air. You can't invis past them. They will see you when you're invisible. You can't block them. They will one-shot you through the block. I have tried this many times. Full health, overshields, everything. The Mods just one-shot you. You can't stop it. Past that, the only other biggest weakness of this thing is, again, getting slammed into a wall. You gotta be careful with that one. And just remembering you're not invincible and that you have other things in your toolkit. You don't just have your sword. That's the biggest issue I've had using the build, is that I get out there and I have so much fun using the sword and blocking damage and, blocking big, missiles coming in and everything. It's cool. This thing even blocks tank shots. I actually tested this out. This thing even blocks tank shots in Grandmasters. It's not Birthplace of the Wild. I forgot which one has it. Devil's Lair. That tank in Devil's Lair, that shot that shoots at you from that tank, this thing blocks that. Now, it does do some damage to there, but this will block the tank shot too. That's how strong this build is. Now, that's going to do for this build, guys. Again, this is our Paladin build. This is a restoration. This is a light type build for this Stronghold, okay? Now, I'm going to be showing off. I'm going to give you a little teaser at the end of this on what the next build is going to be. I've got another version of this build that's going to be a lot more offensive oriented. Now, while I do like this build, and while it is very good, I know a lot of people like the restoration aspect, especially ×2. I do have some people that prefer this one over the build I'm going to be showing off. However, the one I'm going to be showing off next, that I'm going to be doing on my next build, is going to be my own own personal favorite for this version. This next version I'll show you is the one I ran all last season during Grandmasters, and there were a few times where I carried the team using this build too. This is one that I personally was kind of irked when I was using it, because a lot of people saw what I was using and they were like, use a real build, and then I went in and I didn't die when they died several times. I was able to res them, take out the boss. It's going to be crazy. You guys are going to love this next build coming up. This is a Paladin, and I'll show you what our next build is at the end. I'm going to give a little preview of it. But that being said, thank you all for coming by. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a like. Again, this is our first full build. Hopefully, as I go through these, I get a lot smoother doing it. I have a lot less editing to do, and I can probably get you the information a little bit smoother. Again, this is the first full build that I've done. I've normally done shorts as far as builds goes, but this is something I've been wanting to venture into for a while, so we're getting into the full build. So thank you all for coming by. I will see you next time, and enjoy the preview for the next build. Today we had the Paladin. Next time we're going to have the Dark Knight.